Hello, and welcome to another podcast of Jurors in Disguise. My name is Mary Rose Peterson, and I own Covert Ops Jury Investigations. What do we do? I'm glad you asked. We investigate the jury to find the one or more jurors who lied so that they would be chosen and could then ensure that our clients would be convicted. This podcast is a continuation of one that I did a while back. Our client's name is Brandon Ward. He wrote a book called Stand Your Ground. I talked about that in the last podcast. The title is, of course, Stand Your Ground, a story of small-town politics, police corruption, and court injustice. I want to reiterate that, yes, this was written by Brandon while in prison. He's still in prison. But I will tell you, even knowing what I know about the case and being very biased in Brandon's favor, because the facts support that he was falsely accused and wrongfully convicted, that this book is beautifully written, it's easy to read, and it's shocking. Why I say that is because there were so many things shared in the book. There's even some evidence there that was not presented at trial. There's testimony there, witness statements that were not presented at trial. There's so much to show that Brandon did not get a fair trial by an impartial jury. And what I started to say is that the book is not written by someone who's angry or bitter or trying to spin his way out of prison or slant the truth. It is written by a young man who was a Marine at the time that this happened, by someone who understands truth and honor and justice. And yes, it's his side, but the truth lines up with everything that he has said. And so, as you know, well, you may not know, but if you watch the other podcast, you will find that we did investigate Brandon's case. We found gross misconduct by one of the jurors who turned out to be the foreperson, misrepresented himself completely during the voir dire, was not truthful. And it is our position that he got in that jury room and convinced the others to vote in favor of guilty, which again does not line up with the truth. But in this podcast, I'm going to talk to Brandon's parents, Carolyn and Steve Ward. Steve is retired Marine, retired military. Carolyn is a military wife, and their family has been obviously rocked to the core because of this case, which is nearly 20 years old. 20 years. So Brandon has been incarcerated as long as he lived on this earth as a free man, and yet he is following in his parents' footsteps and training. He is still honorable. He is still helping others. He is still bettering himself. And then I'm thrilled to promote his book. Help me welcome Carolyn and Steve Ward, Brandon's mom and dad. Well, it's good to talk to you both, and I really just wanted to have you come on and, like you said, bring some awareness to your case and to what you've gone through, and to just share your story, your side, whatever it is that you have wanted to say to the world, but nobody's listening, or you think no one is. Well, I'm still listening, and based on the traction that we're getting with our show, Jurors in Disguise, it's catching on. People are starting to finally realize that the courtrooms are not like they were in the days of Perry Mason or even Matlock.
Right.
It's not like that. It's a setup. It's a trap. You walk into it thinking that justice will be served, especially given your family's history. You know, you've lived a life of service and honor and dedication, and to go in and have all of that denied you, I don't even have words.
Yeah, it's been hard. The phone call we got at 4:00 in the morning. We were living in San Diego at the time, and Brandon was in Pensacola. So Carolyn took the call. We got the news, and we've been living the nightmare ever since.
This happened back in 2006. Brandon went to trial in 2007. And so we're coming up to next year. It'll be 20 years since this nightmare started. And I think if you haven't been involved in it or it's never happened to your family, you can't even understand, the devastation that it does to all of us, to him, especially to someone who's innocent, to live this nightmare. But yeah, we all want to believe that, the cops and the judges and prosecutors and everybody involved is there to find the truth.
Right.
But they aren't.
No.
They're not. They're there for their own. And we're not going to say all of them because we do have a lot in our family that are law enforcement. Obviously there's a lot in our family, military, law enforcement, and all of them have served honorably. But you have those few that I think, depending on the area they live in, and in this situation, this was a small town. All these people grew up together. They all knew each other, whether judges, police officers, everyone involved.
Right.
They were not going to speak out against anybody, whether right or wrong.
Right.
We definitely went into the panic mode, but we had some friends in Pensacola that we knew we could rely on. So we got in touch with them early that morning, and that's how we hired Leo Thomas. He was recommended as the best in Pensacola. So we went with him, and 2 trials later, and a lot of money, a whole lot of money was spent, and still fighting.
Well, with the first trial, they had, and I guess, obviously we had never been through anything like this, so we didn't know what to expect. But the prosecutor, they brought in, and we never could understand why, they would bring in a special prosecutor from out of he was from Santa Rosa,
Yeah.
but down, I'm not really sure where the area he was at, Okaloosa area,
Right.
whatever. And they brought him in to prosecute this case once we hired a private attorney. And he went at Brandon with everything he had. You're talking someone who was a Marine,
Right.
was up for promotion that Monday, the day, after this happened, had never been in trouble. I mean, he went at him. He even come at us. We weren't even living in the city. He tried to charge us with a crime just for being his parents. I mean, he did everything he could except look at the evidence. So they charged him with, surprisingly enough, first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. In spite of witness testimony at the scene showing that Brandon was the victim, he was not the aggressor, that they came after him. And like I said, you can read it in his book. He has it all, all the witness statements. But so we go to trial. It was a sham. We couldn't believe what we were witnessing and what we saw.
The prosecuting attorney, he even mentioned the death penalty at one point. So that was unbelievable, but that finally went away.
I mean, you have monsters out there that are walking out after 5 years, and they have someone who's never been in trouble, who's never had any issue, a Marine at that, and he's gonna do everything he can, to throw him in prison for life, and not even without a second thought, with not even a blink of an eye, and so we go to trial. Like I said, we were treated horribly by anybody. I mean, just being in that town, we were a danger. They come after, they vandalize our vehicles. Everything they can do to us, they did during this trial. We were also in fear for our lives.
Right.
So we had our family and friends in the courtroom. These people in the courtroom, the first jury that was seated, we had people sleeping on the jury.
Yeah.
That was brought to the judge's attention, and he didn't care. They say, you will hear all the evidence in this case. Okay. We believe that because that's what you're shown. That's what we're brought up to believe. Right. You're not shown all the evidence. You're only shown the evidence that the judge wants you or the jury to hear.
The aggressors in your case were heavily connected.
Yes.
And that came out in the book. I'm thankful that you included that.
You have young men and women that, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, we've all been there. You do stupid stuff. You get it. But then it's compounded by the police, the prosecution, the judge, even their own families who don't want to admit, oh my gosh, they made the mistake themselves. But now we're going to lump it all on this one young man and we're going to sentence him to life in prison. And, my hope is every day that these people feel the pain that they've put us through in Brandon. We can deal with it because we're outside, but Brandon, the pain that he has to go through every day, knowing that he's incarcerated for something he didn't do. And that's what bothers me the most, is that no one in the state of Florida, not our officials, not any of our representatives, want to do anything about it.
No.
That's why that book was so important, was to show everything that had happened. And the witness statements are in there to show, the lies that they said, what had happened. If anyone can't read that and say, oh my God, what is going on here? There's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong. It's really who is telling the better story. When you really look at it, do you believe that happens, that they get won over by the prosecutor?
And the prosecutors say, who do you believe? In fact, our judge, even afterwards, we asked several things of him, and he said, well, the jury chose to believe her. You tell the better story, so you're more believable. That's what happened to law. What happened to the truth? What happened to facts? It should not be where somebody comes in and puts on a good show and you believe them over the person that sat there and said nothing because they're told not to speak up. You don't.
Brandon spoke up, though. Brandon spoke. He told his story, and no matter how many times his story never changed. His version of the events from the day it happened to the writing of this book almost 20 years later. Now you realize Brandon has no paperwork with him. Okay, because over the years, of course, and they're only allowed a small space, so you can only store so much stuff. Brandon has no paperwork, no documents, no anything, so he has to rely on everything from memory, from day to now. Right,
that's impressive,
and it is, considering everything matches exactly what he said from the day it happened to the day to almost 20 years later. So that's telling you, someone who can remember that. And that's not a lie. It's the people that can't remember what happened. Those are the ones that are lying. But right, I mean, it's sad when you can't present all the evidence to get to the bottom of what actually really did happen.
Yeah, prime example is the two aggressors were under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and they kept that out.
Yeah.
So if the jury would have known that might have been a shot.
Made a difference, right? It might have made it harder for the foreperson to
exactly
group.
What happens if they do have a bad background? What happens if they have criminal behavior? What happens if they have brushes with the law? If you don't put that in, so that's making it look like the person that's accused is just this little monster, but everybody else is good. It's incorrect.
Yep. The witnesses are squeaky clean, church choir boys. Yeah.
No,
that's the thing. The state knows that they're putting liars on the stand. And they put them up there anyway. Back in the day, juries were chosen from your peers. They were chosen from the people in your village. They knew you. They knew the family. They knew if you stole the neighbor's cow or whether the neighbor was a drunk and made that up. They knew before they ever got in there. They knew about the case. They knew about the family. They knew about the integrity of the two people on either side of the bench. Now, if you know the defendant, you're out. If you know anything about the case, you're out. If you know anything about the family, you're out. There is no jury of your peers. The peers are not allowed on the jury anymore. They intentionally pick people that are not your age, that are not your skin color, that are not in your financial background, that have no idea about the system, because if you or anyone you know has ever even been accused of a crime, you're out. 90% of the time, you're out.
Oh, you don't believe that. Because you've found out through your own investigations that the people lie to get on the jury. They keep their background secret. They keep what they do and everything else. They don't even tell you where they live. Half times I don't even know if they actually investigate anyone even being on there. But then we've also found in Florida, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you perjure yourself, it doesn't matter because there's no repercussion. We found that out too.
There's no accountability. They're not gonna, and it's a 3rd-degree felony to lie to the court. But when we go back to court and we show, like in your case, that the foreperson should never have been on your jury, should never have been on that jury. When we showed that, and the courts are like, I'm like, why are you not as horrified and angry as I am, and my team and my client and their family? Why are you not upset about that? Because the appropriate emotional response for the court is, whoa, bring him in here. Bring him in here. Subpoena, go get that juror. Bring him in here. I want them standing in front of me. I want them to answer for their crime. They lied to the court. That is a third-degree felony. I want them prosecuted. That's what should happen. The state attorney's office should say, bring him in. Bring him in. We're going to prosecute them for their crime. But instead, they're mad at me. They're angry at us. They're angry at our client. They're angry at you. They're pissed that you brought it up, that you found it. Because I think a lot of this, the state attorneys already know about. Yeah. But they got caught. I think a lot of it is that they got caught.
Well, I think the problem is that they just don't. Well, we know that because the prosecutors encourage witnesses to lie. So it's not a surprise to them that someone would lie to get on the jury, because they encourage their own witnesses to lie. They get witnesses to change their stories. Like, for example, okay, we had witnesses. That's why it has bothered us how an indictment even came down in the first place when this happened. You have witnesses, Brandon's girlfriend and the other girl that was there. Their written statements showed that these two men ran after Brandon. They attacked Brandon. They wrote it in their statements not less than an hour after this happened. Whereas what everybody says, what is said right away is what is accurate because it's in your mind. You haven't been influenced by outside people, anything like that. They both said it. Okay. Now, by the time we go to trial, a year later, one of the girls' statement, they have worked on her, and she's like, I don't know. It's like, what do you know? You wrote this, but see, they encourage them to lie. So to them, so what? A juror lied to get.
That's it. That's exactly the point I'm making.
It's very sad.
I think that they are so accustomed to putting liars in the witness box, they don't care anymore. It's like whatever. One more lie on their belt. We got our verdict. We got our win. We don't care who. We don't care how we had to get it. We don't care who had to lie to help us get it. The verdict is not set in stone just because somebody uttered those words in court. If the verdict's tainted, if the verdict was decided by jurors who lied to get on the jury for whatever reason, then it's no good. It's out, according to our Bill of Rights, anyway.
And Brandon has said this with his book. If this can help one person, right, that is, this has happened to, then he's, it might not, if it doesn't help him, at least he can help someone else understand the system and what they're going to do to them from the day they accuse you of something, whether you did it or not. In his case, he didn't, but in those people, just so that it would help them navigate it, because it has been horrific.
Yeah,
it has. After the first trial, of course, there was, it got overturned. On appeal because of the jury instructions. First trial started in 2007. I think we went back to trial in 2010 for the second trial. And if we thought the first trial was a farce, well, the second trial was just as much of a farce, because the same testimony came out, it's a different judge, but they, again, would not allow, expert testimony. They would. I don't think a lot of people know this that haven't been involved, that if you get your sentence overturned, they can't charge you with the same crime again. They have to go lower. Okay. So if he had already been convicted of, let's say, first-degree murder and attempted, they can't charge you with that anymore. They have to step it down. So he was charged with second-degree murder and attempted second-degree murder. Yeah. And so I don't know. The deliberations took a while, but they came back with manslaughter and attempted second-degree murder, which now you have a verdict that doesn't match or makes no sense, because you need that element of, a depraved mind to have a second degree. And so it made no sense. So you're saying he could be convicted of manslaughter, which is accidental. It's an accidental death. You know, you didn't set out to cause it, but now you're saying that he turned around and had a depraved mind after that to do an attempt at it. It made no sense. So of course you try to fight it, denied. They sentenced him to 60 years. So they were going to do everything they could because Brandon had the nerve to get his first trial and come back. So they were going to make sure
They were royally.
yeah. Yeah, they were good. Nothing we try, and then, you know, you try to appeal it. Well, your judge from the first trial is now on the appellate court.
Yeah.
You know that wasn't going anywhere.
I have to say, I know about the case, obviously. When I got to the part in the book where he woke up handcuffed in the hospital, my heart just, I was like, I can't imagine what was going through his mind. The shock of, why am I handcuffed? Why am I under arrest? Why am I even being considered? I was just attacked by people I don't even know in the dark.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at me? And, you know, this was a horrible, tragic event. It was a tragedy. There was no premeditation. Nobody was murdered. It was a horrible, violent act. And in my opinion, still always, Brandon was the victim. He was the one that was attacked and he defended himself. That's the only scenario to me that even makes any sense.
Well, like I said, the evidence proves, you know, it's their own evidence.
Right.
You know, evidence we made up or
They collected it.
Presented right by the state. How do you get an indictment when you have witness statements? How do you present anything to a grand jury if you have witness statements that are opposite of what you're presenting? I don't understand how that works either. But
most people don't know that grand juries only hear from the state.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't, the defense not in the room, that they only hear from the state and they only get to hear what the state presents.
Exactly.
So I don't know, without a transcript of your grand jury, I don't know, did the prosecutor even present the facts that would have exonerated Brandon? Or did they only tell their side in order to get an indictment so that they could go forward?
Well, they would have to have only presented their facts, because if they would have presented those witness statements that said those guys ran after Brandon, there's no way a grand jury would be like, "What are you talking about?" And like you said, you do understand that, you know, when there's a death, they get nervous. But again, you know, that's why we have these laws in place that you can defend yourself. And you know what? So what did they expect him to stand there while two other guys come after him with weapons on top of that?
Right.
And stand there and do nothing?
Right.
I mean, is that what everybody was suggesting? I don't know.
It's hard to say. You'll never know.
From a veteran military position, what has gone through your mind? Because it's like everything you stood for and knew or thought you knew was not at all what happened. None of the standards applied to you and your family.
Yeah. It's just shocking, the whole thing. It really is. It's been hard on us. Really has. 20 years is a long time. But like Carolyn said, the law, it's not fair sometimes, you know. And the trials weren't fair. Not even close. So you just got to press on, you know.
We have probably spent close to $1 million at this point, probably more, because like I said, we didn't live in the state. Actually, we've only been back in Florida for the past 7 years. And you figure this is going on 20 years. We have lived out of state due to the jobs and stuff like that. So we have always had to fly in and out constantly. And we did it twice a month.
Yep.
We would come in just so we can see Brandon, you know, to have that connection.
Talk a little bit about Brandon's experience in prison. I know he's been hurt multiple times.
Yeah, he's had some rough times for sure. There's a lot of gangs in there. You get on the bad side of them, you got to do everything you can to protect yourself. So he's been moved a few times for incidents like that. One of his buddies was stabbed
multiple times.
multiple times.
Right.
But the camp he's in now is much better. It's a incentivized camp, so and he's in a veteran dorm, so he gets treated a lot better. And I don't know, he's been moved 5 times?
Oh, at least
over
at least,
over
yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
He's been moved around quite a bit, but
They can move you without, they don't need an excuse. They could just say, oh, we decide to move you. If there's something somebody wants that you have, they're going to do everything they can to take it from you. And it's basically survival of the fittest, it's whoever's stronger. They know, okay, if I try to take it from you, what's going to happen to me if I try to take it from you? That's where
They weigh the odds.
and that's the sad thing is, when this all happened back in 2006, you got a Brand, like I said, 19-year-old, just basically out of boot camp into his first A school, and he wasn't very big. He was maybe 140 pounds, 145 pounds, 5'8", if that, 5'7", 5'8", going up against those guys that attacked him that was 6'3", 225 pounds, 230 pounds. So over the years, you learn, you got to become stronger. You got to do what you can to make sure that, because there's always going to be someone bigger than you. And he's still not big. He's only, maybe 5'9", if that,
yeah, about 160 pounds.
160 pounds. We're not talking much bigger than what it was when he went in, but he's a lot stronger. And, and Brandon is well liked. He's very polite, and we've had a lot of correctional officers, come up to us and say what a polite young man he is. And they're just like, my God, he's wonderful. I mean, he takes whatever courses he can take. He does everything he can to better himself and to help others while he's in there. This is what the state of Florida wants to keep incarcerated. But the ones that continue to commit crimes, those people get let out every chance they get. But the ones that are decent, that have family support, friends, family, Florida doesn't want they don't want them to see the light of day.
If you go into trial expecting the system to exonerate you, expecting the truth to come out, expecting justice to occur, you are going to most likely be very sadly mistaken, because that is not what trials are for.
We were sadly mistaken. And we are disillusioned now because we were taught to believe that you tell the truth and that's what you're supposed to do. And we have now found out differently, that the truth means nothing in a Florida courtroom, and witnesses can lie. People can do whatever they want. It means nothing. And no one feels bad. That's what bothers us, I think, the most too.
I hope and pray for the podcast that people who have the power to make real change and to force judges to uphold their own laws, that's who I pray watches these. And that's who I pray steps in and starts saying, you know what, this isn't right. What happened to Brandon was a clear case of self-defense. If anything, they should have been tried for attacking him.
Exactly.
It should have been the other way around. He should not have been in prison for 20 years, and your family should not have had to go through this hell, financially, emotionally, mentally. I mean, I have a son. I can't even imagine. It was hard enough having a husband in prison for something I knew that didn't happen, but to have your child there, I can't even.
And it gets harder every day because, we're probably, I know it breaks family apart. It breaks families apart. We've been lucky that, we have such a strong, we have family and friends that have backed us and have been with us. So that helps us.
Right.
Because believe me, there's been many times where, you just break down and it's very hard to keep going forward. But, and that's our hope too, is that someone reads Brandon's book, someone sees these podcasts and they say, wait a minute, let me, put a bug in someone's ear. And that's what we hope. We need to really start looking at some of these cases and seeing what some of these prosecutors have done and some of the misconduct that happens during these trials, and start holding some of these people accountable. Why do we even have these laws on the books if you're not even going to follow them? Why say, oh, you can't lie, and it's a crime, and
Right.
you clearly let them lie. You know they're lying. You've told them they can actually lie on the stand. I mean, stuff like that. I just really hope that someone sees this and wants to help and actually can look at Brandon's case and say, hey, something was really wrong here.
We want people who are violent
Right.
to be in prison.
Yes.
We want the
Yeah.
ones who actually are guilty to
Right.
be prosecuted fairly,
Yes.
even though fairly, and convicted
Yes.
fairly,
Yes.
because that's how the system is supposed to work. When the jurors don't hear all the facts, when the jurors don't hear the truth, to me, it makes it very easy for the biased juror to get in there and spin it, because all the things that would have made them, like you said, given them pause, say, wait a minute, beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, I have doubts. I have doubts about this because that doesn't, as Martin always says, that doesn't pass the smell test.
No.
It's like that doesn't even make any sense. Well, that would have given them pause. But when you remove all of that, which is done before the trial even begins, and you don't know that they're going to take it all out until, like in our case, hours before trial, when you've already turned down the deal and you're already going to trial, and now you realize all of these things that would have mattered to my side
Right.
are not going to be presented tomorrow.
No one's ever reached out to us ever to say, because again, they all live in that town. No one wants to be the one to say, you know what, this was so wrong what we did, that we allowed an innocent man to go to prison for our lies. And not one of them's ever going to step up and say that, because they have to live there and they have to deal with that. I don't want to believe that every one of again, we're talking 18, 19, 20-year-olds on that night. Emotions were running high and stuff, but you would think years later that someone would say, my God, I can't live with this guilt anymore, that we did this to this young man. I can't even believe any of those jurors. Maybe one of those jurors will see this and say, my God, I can't live with this guilt anymore.
Yeah.
And speak up.
The problem of it is that jurors lied to get on the jury.
Right.
Witnesses lied in that in that witness box. Prosecutors put people on the stand. They knew that we're lying because that's how they make a case. That's how they win.
Exactly.
So you can't go into a trial thinking that the truth's going to be heard.
Well, you have to find the way to get across whether the truth's heard or not, because, Brandon told what happened. Like I said, his version of events is the same 20 years later, without any paperwork in front of him, any type of record, any type of anything. He had to write that just off of recollection.
Yeah.
Of what he remembered. And it's remarkable that he could even remember. And there's a lot of facts in that book that Steve and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because we know what happened at trial because we were there. We were there for all the motion hearings. We were there for every step of the way. But we didn't hear all the other little details of, other stuff that had went on. Brandon was a Marine. He was in the Marine Corps. He was doing his thing. We're living someplace else because that's, and so it was very hard to hear what had happened, some of the stuff that we hadn't heard. And we're just hoping that this nightmare comes to an end at some point.
We do too.
Have our son home and, he can, begin to enjoy the life that they've denied him.
Right. Well, we pray, of course, that people will buy the book.
Yes. Yes.
Buy the book. Read the book.
Read what happened.
Read the book. We read the facts of the case. Read what really happened. And it's not just Brandon's word. There is evidence in here that was not presented at trial. There are statements that no one ever heard. That's one thing I know about military. It's a serious oath that you take, and you will die to defend your country.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely unthinkable what happened to him and to your family. And I do pray that people watch and they are as horrified as we are, that a juror came in there and lied, that a prosecutor lied, that witnesses lied in order to convict a Marine, a man who had signed up and swore to defend his country with his life. And his life was nearly taken from him, and the state used liars to manipulate the facts and the trial in order to convict him. We don't fully understand why,
No.
but I know that it happened. It happened in our case. It happens in all of our clients' cases. So we pray that that something breaks for you soon. I know that the burden of this is crushing most days.
It is and you know, we try to stay strong for Brandon. And you know what's and more so is Brandon has stayed strong. Brandon probably is stronger than we are, actually, because he encourages us all the time. You know, he keeps us going, and it's impressive that he has managed to do that after almost 20 years, knowing that he's innocent and he's been convicted of this and he has to sit in prison for something he hasn't done. He still is very positive,
Yeah.
you know, very uplifting to us. And like I said, he helps those inside. That's what gets me, is he hasn't let it crush him. He hasn't let it change who he is. Even after everything they did to him, after everything that happens there. I mean, it's horrific sometimes, just talking to him, just hearing, you know, what goes on, and then when we see him and stuff like that. But yeah, he's a remarkable young man.
Well, and to your tribute, you figure he's been incarcerated as long as he was free, and you clearly instilled values and morals in him that stuck.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a great tribute to you as parents, that you raised him right.
Okay.
And that's another reason why this injustice is so horrific.
It is.
You know,
And we appreciate all you do for us.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Brandon stays on my heart. You know, he was a kid and in a horrible situation. And I just, you know, as awful as this might sound, I thank God that he's alive.
Oh, and we do also.
I thank God that he did not die that night. I'm sorry for those that came at him to take his life, but I'm thankful that he defended himself. I'm thankful that he's still here and he's still positive. And one day he is going to get out. I pray very soon, and he'll have quite the testimony. And I know that he will continue to encourage others and to help them in whatever they need to do in life, you know, because that's who he is.
We agree.
You know, thank y'all very much I know it's painful to go back and relive it, and but it's important that people understand what really goes on, and it's not what they see on TV.
Yeah, it's true. This does help to educate people. And like I said, everybody watches those shows, and there's always that moment like, oh yeah, they're really looking for the truth. No, they need to know. They need to understand how it really is.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
we'll appreciate it. Thank you for having us on.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and I do hope that it breaks the floodgate open and that something really amazing comes from this. And like I said, just awareness is really starting to matter, which that's after about 8 months of this. I'm like, I don't know if these are catching on. And then we had one little 30-second clip that got almost 29,000 views. And it's one of the silliest ones. It doesn't even make a lot of sense, but people are sharing it. And I'm like, well, that's the point, is to point them back to the podcast. I hope they'll watch the full episodes. But thank you for taking the time and for going back to something that I know is painful. But I do pray that it helps Brandon come home soon.
We do also. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for watching and listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And if you know of someone who needs our help, you will find our contact information at the end of the show. Until next time, remember, the courtrooms may be silent, but we won't be. We will speak up, we will speak out, and we will always speak the truth. Thank you, and God bless.